This is the required eye chart, which none of you can read, but that's the entire point of this. This is just to illustrate how hot the topic of manufacturing has been. Every organization that I deal with, both public and private, have come up with some kind of assessment, some kind of analysis about manufacturing and what they view as what we can do as a country, as a government, as private industry to really get manufacturing back on its feet. And so in my, and unfortunately Dan went through a long list of how long I've been at NIST, but in my long career there, this is really the first time that I've seen manufacturing discussed in so many different forms by so many different people. It's going to take action. We're yet to see the action end of this, but it certainly is encouraging to see that manufacturing is really viewed as an important component for what this country needs to really make the recovery out of this recession. Part of the data when they started to look at and a little bit of the misbeliefs that were there is that we don't need manufacturing. We can deal with services, and the service industry will keep us where we need to be. And in particular, if you look at the balance of trade, there was an assumption that the services would offset any reduction in actually exporting manufactured goods. And I think we found that that definitely is not the case. And so that if we're going to really work on this balance of trade issue, it really means we're going to have to manufacture more, we're going to have to sell more, globally around the world. In terms of manufacturing employment, I think the other thing that they started to realize is that when they look at where the manufacturing employment has really dropped off, it's not in the small and medium-sized companies. It's the companies that we as an MEP program focus on. And in fact, it's the small and medium-sized manufacturers who are really doing the hiring these days. And so now I've got the attention of policymakers of let's look not at the big guys, but let's look at the small and medium-sized manufacturers and what is it they need and what can we do to help them to be more competitive. Again, if you look at the data that comes out of these many studies and many recommendations, and it's all part of the educational process, if you will, for the policymakers, in that what the importance of manufacturing is in terms of really the salaries that it generates, the additional jobs that it supports, the fact that if we're going to innovate our way out of this, and I think you've heard lots of people use that, they don't know what it means per se, but they say we'll innovate our way out of this to have manufacturing recover. They keep forgetting that manufacturing is where most of the research is done. It's where most of the new inventions and creations come from, and not other sectors. It also shows that this is where the jobs really are, but it also has pointed out that it's really skilled production workers is where the biggest gap is at this point. And so you've got to have a much more balanced approach. It's not about degreed folks, scientists and engineers. It's also part of the picture, but it's also a lot of the skilled production workers, which is where the real gap is. And I heard some real encouraging news about being able to match up some folks here yesterday with job openings. And it's one thing that I hear as I go around the country pretty uniformly is that there are job openings there, but people are having a very tough time. And I say people, manufacturers are having a tough time finding the skilled workers for those positions. And so that's something that I know we're working on and working on with folks like the Department of Labor to address. In terms of some of the initiatives coming out of this administration, you'd seen a picture somewhat similar to this in the previous presentation, where the President announced the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership as a broad initiative, a way of actually pulling together industry, academia, and the federal government to help identify what was needed from a policy perspective to support manufacturing, where were the gaps that the federal agencies could have initiatives to help support. This collection of folks, this committee, is really just about to release their report and the recommendations that go with that, which will drive many of the things that you will see that are going on in the federal government. You also, once you see these recommendations, I think you'll see some alignment with some of the budget proposals that were released by the President on Monday. Again, with very, very strong support for manufacturing and the technology that's needed to help us be more competitive. Part of that, and I don't know if folks recognize the name Ron Bloom, but at one point we had an individual, he didn't like the name, but was referred to as the manufacturing czar within the White House that was advising the President on that. Ron is no longer there, but what they did was to actually create an Office of Manufacturing Policy, which is the first time that's been done. The other, to me, as a career employee and know how things really work in the federal government, it's not in the White House. It's actually in the Department of Commerce is taking the lead on that. It's being co-chaired with the head of NEC. But it is an office that really is going to take some of the recommendations from AMP and other places to really help start restructuring and reformatting many of the policies within the federal government to, again, look at manufacturing. And I can tell you that one of the challenges, as you full know, there's many, many aspects that you talk about if you're really trying to help the manufacturing community. So it is about taxes. It is about the workforce and training. It is about the technology pieces. It's about many things that cut across many federal agencies. And so coordination at that policy level on manufacturing, which has never really been done before at this level, I think will be an important dimension of really getting the different federal agencies all pulling in the same direction and focused on what's good for the manufacturing community. What makes me even more encouraged about that is so that the Office of Manufacturing Policy is really acting at a policy level. But at a program level, we're in the process at my host organization, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, a national program office for advanced manufacturing. And it's this organization that will pull in folks from other federal agencies to do the coordination at a program level to be able to really get things that are going on in a DOE in the energy space, or things that are going on at NASA in the space arena, or DOD, et cetera, to be able to pull all of these things together to get much better leverage and coordination across those programs. Innovation. I don't know if you read the word a lot, but everybody likes to use it, and it comes everything from the Coca-Cola ad to who knows what. Everybody's innovating in some way, shape, or form. And so the problem there is, what does that mean for a manufacturer, and what can you do to actually translate that into something that's actionable that you can work with? And so that's something that certainly me leading the MEP program that we're focused on. But again, sometimes you need to do a little bit of a sales job on the front end, and that is, why do I need to innovate? Why do I need to change? And so what I want to do is show a few charts that talk a little bit about what we see across the country in terms of manufacturing, why innovation is really important. One of our colleagues at Georgia Tech, they every 2 years do a study where they survey their manufacturers to ask them, what strategy do you have as a business that's really driving your profit margin? And this data right here shows that although all the factors are a part of this and are important at some level, it's really innovation that really drives the profitability of companies. You need to factor in these other elements, but if you're not out there innovating, you're really losing the biggest opportunity you've got to be a much more profitable company. You might ask, well, geez, if I'm talking about growing in high-growth firms, but I'm a small company, I'm a small manufacturer, that's not really something I can do. And what we find is that's not the truth. It really is based on the smaller firms have a much more flexible, much more adaptable, much more likely to be able to show the kind of growth that we're talking about. They tend to be younger firms, and I think younger only means that they're much more open to some of the changes that they need to go through. But we also found that there is really no geographic or industry sector bias on any of these. It's all across the country. It's all industry sectors where you really can, if you've got the stomach for going through the changes and to make the commitment and investment, that you can also be, one of these high growth companies. Another indicator, I mean, if you think of what country out there you think has a fairly robust, strong manufacturing base, and you look at a Germany or look at a Japan, and what this chart is showing is kind of the level of technology that's within the manufacturing sector, going from, if you will, the bottom being the lowest content to up at the top, the red, the highest content. You can see that what's categorized as medium high, and I'll admit I'll have to go look to see what the exact definition of medium high is, but it does illustrate that those manufacturing countries that are viewed as the strongest really do focus on technology and the technology that's in their manufacturing sector. And you can also see for both Germany and Japan that low technology is really a small part of what they're doing. And so for us, again, as an MEP program, what we're really trying to do is to help bring technology into manufacturers, particularly the small and medium-sized folks.